Kia ora, I'm Chelsea Daniels, and this is The Front Page, a daily podcast presented by the New Zealand Herald. A step forward for housing capacity in our largest city, or a step back on housing affordability? Auckland's explosive debate over density planning has come to a head, with Housing Minister Chris Bishop making a U-turn on capacity limits. It's all got to do with the controversial PC 120 plan, which has been scaled back slightly to allow for 1.6 million homes to be built as opposed to 2 million. But what does that actually mean? And why have the rules to pack more homes into Auckland sparked such a fierce debate? Today on The Front Page, journalist Simon Wilson is with us to unpack the updated plans, the protests, and what it means for your backyard. So Simon, first off, what in the world is this Plan Change 120?
Well, if you listen to Chris Bishop, you go back to 2016, which was the date when the Auckland Unitary Plan was adopted, and that allowed for pretty significant upzoning of Auckland. And as Bishop said in his speech today, the result of that has been quite a bit more density and also lower rents. In Auckland. It's been very well studied and it's been internationally peer-reviewed and all of that, so we know that. The Auckland Unitary Plan, though, didn't allow for enough density in the city. So what followed from that was a short-lived bipartisan agreement that they would allow for almost all private sections to be subdivided in three, with three-storey buildings built on each of the subdivided part. That bipartisan approach didn't survive. It ended up being a Labour plan, but National opposed it going into the last election. And they instructed the council, they allowed the council to put that aside if they were prepared to come up with a new plan that would retain the same capacity for growth as the earlier one, but would focus density around train stations, particularly the train stations that would be part of the central city area, the city rail link area.
Which makes sense,
yes,
right?
That's right. Town centres also makes sense, and along other major transport routes, which also makes sense. Everybody in theory says that's where development should occur. In practice, if you live near a train station and it means that an apartment building might go near your house, you might argue that this is still the wrong place. So that's what this debate's been all about. Plan Change 120 is the council's response to a government directive from last year that says, we want density, but you've got to focus it in those targeted areas. So that's what Plan Change 120 does. At the same time, it also made it much harder to build in areas of coastal erosion and the areas that are likely to flood. And that's a very important part of Plan Change 120 that nobody's questioned and I think is going to stay whatever the developments are.
So what's all this about 2 million homes being built in Auckland? First off, that seems impossible.
It is impossible. We have had around 14,000 homes built each year for several years now. There's a pretty stable average there. At that rate, it will take 100 years to build up to 2 million. We already have 550,000 homes. So to build another 1.5 would take at least another 100 years. So that tells you that the 2 million figure is not a target, is not a plan that there will be those houses. Minister Bishop, in his speech, spent some time trying to explain why you zone for a larger capacity than you will actually need. And the reason really comes down to, if you only zone for the exact amount of housing you think you're going to need, that then becomes an instruction to every landowner that they must build in the way the zoning, to the maximum the zoning allows on their own land. An instruction to developers, an instruction to private homeowners. And of course, you don't have that. Nobody's going to argue for that. So you have to allow for more capacity than you need so that landowners, property owners, have choice. I will buy this piece of land and I will build there because I think I can put up a an apartment building there that people will want to live in because it's in the right place. I won't buy that piece, even though it's zoned for it, because I don't think I can't get a good price, or I don't think it's the right area anyway, and so on. So that's why the 2 million figure was there. It was never an instruction. It was never a target, but it became what Bishop called a red herring that became a lightning rod.
Yeah.
So the wonderful mixed metaphors there, what he's saying there is that it's an irrelevancy to the real argument of how our zoning should develop and how our density and housing density should develop. And it also became a political weapon, if you like, that galvanized a whole lot of anger around issues that really got in the way of a good rational discussion about how we should develop the city.
Yeah, so if the 2 million figure doesn't really mean 2 million more homes, it's not a target, it's only capacity, then why move it down to 1.6? Is it just for purposes that it sounds a little bit better? It sounds like they are listening to Aucklanders and delivering.
Well, this is election year and it sounds better. Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. What Bishop has said is that by moving it down to around 1.6, they've done a couple of things. One is they've made it clear that nobody's intending that we have 2 million homes all of a sudden. And that's the first thing. The second thing is they've said, okay, the council will now decide where to lower the capacity in its existing plan change 120 proposals. So there'll be a plan change with a new number. And the council will be the people, not the government, who will decide which parts of the city don't have that density. Provided, said Bishop, you still retain density around train stations, town centres, and on major transport routes. So in other words, what that turns into really is, if you think of a suburb like Howick, where the local councillors have been up in arms about density proposed in their area, it's quite likely that council will consider a proposal from those councillors to remove Howick density from the plan. So it will just retain 1 or 2 story housing. However, if you look at a place like Mount Eden and the Epsom electorate, where there has also been a big controversy, Mount Eden is close to train stations. It's close to town. It's very hard to see how that area would not retain the current plan change 120 density requirements. So the political issue might go away in the outer suburbs, but it's not necessarily going to go away in the closer suburbs, particularly in that Epsom Mount Eden area.
That 2 million number, how did, I guess, the debate around it get to the point where people thought there were going to be 2 million new houses in Auckland?
I don't know. You used to be in the media. You'd know more than I would. I mean, these things get weaponised, right? I mean, people hear the number and say, 2 million, and as I try to explain. I mean, these things are difficult. I'm not really blaming anyone, really. I suppose these things are difficult because people hear 2 million and they go, well, it's crazy. Why would you ever need 2 million homes in Auckland? And the reality is we don't. And as I tried to explain in my speech, it's a capacity number. It's a theoretical development capacity. So if every house in Auckland or every section in Auckland was developed to its maximum capacity, that's the number. Now, that's never going to happen, but the point is to create abundant opportunities so that you can choose.
And the elephant in the room for them is Epsom, isn't it? Because David Seymour has already gone off on about this Auckland density and in his suburb of Epsom. How likely is it that they will just cater to David Seymour's needs, given the polling at the moment, given it is election year, and given that they may need, ACT seats when push comes to shove?
You would expect that they won't want to give ACT too much ammunition, for too much of an incentive to attract voters in the Epsom electorate away from National to ACT. And you have to remember that in Epsom, although David Seymour comfortably holds the seat, the electorate, the party vote in Epsom goes to National.
That's right.
ACT is only the fourth most popular party in Epsom, behind Labour and the Greens. So there is a lot of potential, you could argue, for the party vote in Epsom to swing to ACT, and National won't want that to happen. So there's an ongoing political difficulty for them there. The National MP for the area, Paul Goldsmith, who stands in the seat and always loses, but he's there as a list MP, he's on record saying, I don't see the problem with just focusing on Greenfields, which is the very outer fringe. The problem with that argument, firstly, is that Greenfields development costs more to do, costs the city more, because even when you have developer contributions, they don't really pay for the extra motorway capacity you need. They don't pay for all of the services that are required, and they certainly don't pay for the maintenance of all those services, roading and water and so on. So it's expensive, but also it's happening anyway. As Bishop said, there is a new city quietly being built in the far south of Auckland, around the Drury, Pukekohe area. That is happening. That city over the next 20, 30 years will be as big as Napier.
Wow.
It's really big. And that's happening. So Greenfields is happening, but at the same time, the capacity for the central city, for the major part of Auckland, for the fringe suburbs, is central to the whole equation, because that's where the density can work and be really functionally efficient. They spent all this money, $5.5 billion to double the capacity of the rail network. That's the City Rail Link, the CRL. That will open this year. They want people to use it. And the more people who live close to a train station, the more they are likely to catch the train, and that means their fares will help contribute to making the train services better. There'll be more trains, there'll be bigger trains, there'll be better security, and that goes round and round. The more people who catch the trains, the better the train services. The better the train services, the more people catch the trains. That is the key to managing congestion on the roads. It's why it's been done. It's also helpful in lowering emissions. It's also helpful for public health, getting more people catching trains rather than, say, being driven to school. So there's a whole lot of issues there that come together. However, in Epsom, the answer to your question is there is a political battle going on, because while people say, yes, we want apartments, there is also a great fear among many people that I don't want an apartment next to my villa. There's a complication in this too.
And looking into my pool.
Yeah, well, you're looking into my pool, but there's a complication in this because last year there was a report published that showed that the people who want to buy apartments in Remuera, Parnell, Epsom, those areas, largely are people who already live there. This is people who have a family home, but they retired, the family have left home, they need to downsize, they don't want to look after the grounds anymore, they want an apartment, but they want to stay in their suburb. Of course they do. So while there's an election issue around we don't want apartments next to our villa, there is also a whole lot of other voters who are saying we do want apartments in this suburb because we want to stay living in it and we want to be able to buy an apartment in it.
Yeah, and the data has been done around that.
Absolutely,
as well,
it has. So it's rather more complex than the simple sloganeering, NIMBY, we don't want apartments next to our villas.
Not in our backyard.
That's right. It is complex because there are a whole lot of people who want to stay in their own backyard and need an apartment to do it.
To create a brighter, more prosperous future for New Zealanders, we have to allow Auckland to grow and become a world-class international city. And it means as a country saying yes a lot more often and no a lot less. Yes to infrastructure, yes to events, yes to transit-oriented development, yes to housing, and yes to growth. But saying yes is not just a political slogan or ideological posturing about progress. It means real change. And that's what this government is about. We're a reforming government. We refuse to accept the idea that New Zealand is in a state of perpetual managed decline.
So the announcement today, I'll walk you through what I took from it. Right, so everyone's unhappy that 2 million homes are to be built. Hang on, actually, it's not 2 million homes. I'll explain to you why. It's about capacity. But anyway, we'll bring it down to 1.6 million. The council is going to decide what areas are going to be under this new plan. Don't know when, and it's up to them.
It will be this year because there'll be new consultation that happens around this. Bishop was very clear that the people will get their chance to have a say, and if people have already had a say, they can have another say, and people who haven't had a say will be invited to have a say anyway. So that will happen, but he is not extending the timeline for the whole project. This all has to be signed, sealed, and in law by, I think it's May 2027. So council has to get its skates on. Council.
If it's council's job, though, then why has government gotten involved at all in the first place? If you're just handing it back to them, you make the hard decisions. You have to crack the news to the guys in Mount Eden.
Yeah, so Bishop's argument, which has previously been an argument adopted by both Labour and National, is that it's too hard for councils to rezone for more density because there are too many voters that jump up and down and scream and shout and say you can't do it. So if central government comes in and says you have to do it, then that takes the political weight off the council. So that's why government's been involved, because they have recognised, both National and Labour have recognised, that unless they say we need more density, it isn't going to happen, and that leaves the cities in a mess.
Right. So it's when you're a kid, you're acting a fool at home, mum says wait until your dad gets home. Government is dad, he's getting home, and you're going to stop acting a fool.
Yeah. And the Bishop in his speech spelt out what that acting a fool means. If you have density in a city, if you have a city that is a thriving, busy place full of people, it's more productive. And that means things like there are more people who are there to buy things, to be entertained by things, to use the services that are provided. If you spread out too far, if you just have suburban sprawl, it's very much harder to do that. Everything costs more to do. And the transport costs on citizens become higher as well. So you want your density because that helps with those things for ordinary people, but also density drives productivity, it drives innovation, and this has been studied globally. It drives progress for societies. So it is Bishop's way of putting it is he says Auckland, in New Zealand, we should stop thinking about Auckland as a large New Zealand city and start to think about it as a small global city, and look at other global cities the same size as Auckland, which is, pushing up to 2 million, and see what they do, how they thrive, what they do to be successful. And density is always a part of that.
One thing I did find fascinating, it's funny that you bring that up, is the comparison of, New York, London and Ireland are looking towards Auckland for answers. And I just sat there and thought, you know what? I don't think so. I don't think Zoran Mandani's sitting there watching this live stream being like, you know what, those density changes in Auckland, New Zealand.
Yeah, you're right. You're right about that in the sense that, of course, people aren't glued to their computers waiting to see what Auckland's next move is going to be. But at the same time, because the Auckland Unitary Plan did unlock housing growth, and we got from a flat situation, we got really a big boost to housing growth. It's when it kicked off, middle of last decade. Because that happened, it has been studied, it has been looked at, and we've gone from, just one example, if you look at the central city, there are around 40,000 people who live in central Auckland now. That's what many people call the CBD. So it's much more than a CBD. That is larger than any suburb in the country. But they have no schools. They have very few services. That's where they live. That's happened in the last 10, 15 years, very, very quickly. And there's capacity for more. So, and that's a good thing because those people can walk and often do. Many of them don't own a car, or if they do, they don't drive it very much. And, that's a real change. It's not that everybody has to live like that. Nobody's suggesting that. There will be no...
You saw it in my eyes. I'm not getting on a bike, Simon. You know I'm not.
But it's about choice. It's about choice, giving people choice and not saying if you want to buy an affordable house, you're going to have to go and live in Pukekohe. Because that is not going to work for most people.
Thanks for joining us, Simon.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode of The Front Page. You can read more about today's stories and extensive news coverage at nzherald.co.nz. The Front Page is hosted and produced by me, Chelsea Daniels. Kane Dickey is our studio operator, Richard Martin, our producer and editor, and our executive producer is Jane Yee. Follow The Front Page on the iHeart app or wherever you get your podcasts, and join us next time for another look beyond the headlines.